Hello, and welcome to The Executive Appeal, a show that convenes the world's most powerful and successful leaders to share mentoring and career advancement advice to help you successfully transition into senior level executive positions. I'm your host, Alex Tremble, award-winning speaker, author, and leadership expert with over a decade of experience coaching and advising some of our nation's most senior level government leaders. So if you're ready to reach your goals, let's get started. Hello. Welcome to the Executive Appeal Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Tremble, and this is the podcast where we bring in brilliant leaders from every corner of the world to share their secrets to help you lead smarter, influence better, and succeed faster. Think of it as your cheat code for navigating leadership with clarity and confidence. And again, I am your host, Alex Tremble, CEO of GPS Leadership Solutions. And over the past decade, I've had the privilege of helping executives from Fortune 500 companies and government agencies navigate leadership, influence, and culture. This podcast is your shortcut to learning what works from the best of the best in the best environment. And I promise you this, what you're about to hear isn't theory. It's proven strategies you can use today. And before we jump in, here is my tiny request with a massive ripple impact. Please hit that like button. Why? Because your attention economy is what fuels the power and reach of this podcast. The more likes, the more shares, the more opportunity people have to listen and watch this, the greater impact our guests' stories have on those around them. So again, you're not just liking, you're really leading a movement. Pretty powerful. One click, right? Just by one click. Now, let's make today extraordinary. Today, I'm joined by an amazing guest who I cannot wait to get into this conversation. So without any further ado, today is a good day. Today, we have with us Mr. Tim Horns. Tim currently serves as the Director of Integrated Talent Management at QinetiQ US. See, Tim began his career in the Air Force as a communications systems operator, but soon was selected as an Airman Leadership School instructor, teaching first-line supervisors how to lead and develop their subordinates. He would ultimately be promoted to serve as the chief of Enlisted Development Education, managing a portfolio of military education of over 250,000 plus members of the U.S. Air Force. And finally, he ended that space as the Command Chief Master Sergeant for the U.S. Air Force University. And again, providing strategic advice to the command on human capital management and mission execution. After leaving the Air Force in 2019, he started his current leadership journey, where he is now at QinetiQ US. His passion for leadership and professional development has led him to move to the corporate office where he's been leading these efforts for the entire company. That includes everything from running their flagship mentoring program and executive development, and really anything that fits into the leadership and learning development portfolio. Without any further ado, how are you doing today, kind sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Alex. I don't know about that bio. Hearing that come back to you feels like I got to live up to that, but it's great to be here. I'm really excited about the conversations we're going to have today.
Man, Tim, you started us off so well already. So here's the reality, though. You and we've had a few conversations, and every time I've spoken to you, I've always walked away in awe. And you just mentioned something that I hear consistently working with the executive leaders that we do, and it's hearing that bio, that list, extensive list of accomplishments can feel like, oh wow, like am I kind of being into myself? But the reality is that you have accomplished that. So if I can ask you, have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome? And if you have, how did you overcome and or move forward in spite of it?
That's such a great question. I mean, the answer is an emphatic yes. I have definitely had imposter syndrome. I believe the real time that I remember I was trying to frame this for those that aren't familiar with the military, right? I became a command chief master sergeant, which by position made me the ranking enlisted person on that base. And specifically, that was at McConnell Air Force Base. But there were other chief master sergeants that were much more experienced. I happened to be the second youngest chief on the base, but yet I was, the leader among those leaders.
Mhm.
And when we would get in a room the first couple of times, I'm not afraid to admit that I was a little bit intimidated, and then that imposter syndrome sort of crept into the mix. So yeah, I remember that feeling. And I would tell you that I don't know that there was a magic pill or spell that helped me get through that as much as taking a deep breath, being patient,
Mhm.
having humility,
Yeah.
right? And well, something I'm passionate about, and it's directly related to this, is the balance of confidence and humility.
Mhm.
And I think it never struck me more poignantly than in that moment, right? The confidence is I belong in the room.
Yeah.
The humility is so does everybody else.
Mm.
And that was really, I think, I lost that feeling that I had to prove myself or that I didn't belong there, and I just engaged again with the confidence that I definitely belong there, but with the humility that I was surrounded by a lot of other great talent, and that helped me get through that particular journey.
That is that's an amazing story and perspective. And I think this is something that it really, really needed to be said because I believe, again, please, Tim, push back. Um, there are so many people who look at, well, first, if you're someone in a senior level position, most people, many people look at you and say, "Oh wow, he or she has got it. She's done it. He is so confident. They're there." But the reality people forget is that those senior leaders are also people, and and people have these emotions, and they can have these. Many of us have those imposter syndrome and so on and so forth, and so. But there's also that piece that I may not feel like I belong there, but I think everyone else belongs there. And then the reality is that maybe someone else in that room also thinks the same thing. So we're all feeling these things, but we all assume everyone else in the room doesn't feel it. So we kind of keep it to ourselves and deal with that stress and that anxiety.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that that's true, and that's why I really think vulnerable communication with some people that you trust is a very important part of the executive development and success. Right, we have to have people that we are comfortable with sharing those kinds of things, and that's how we get past them. Right, and executive coaching is one way to do that. But and I think that's very important. So I think that should be in your toolbox, but also you should have people that are really in your orbit that that you have real relationships with, day to day, that you can trust and be vulnerable with. And I think that's how you move past a lot of those challenges.
So now make me think of a book. I think it's called The Millionaire Next Door. Yeah, good book if you haven't read it. And one of the things that it points out that most people forget or do not realize is that most millionaires are not born into it. They are first generation. Like they worked really hard. They found a way. People helped them. Their opportunities, and they ultimately made it that place. So the vast majority of millionaires um, did not grow there. Weren't just born there. Okay. So what I realized in working with my clients is that the vast majority of senior executives um, um, don't come from a family where their mom and dad and grandpas and so on, all of them are senior executives. They are themselves one of few, and they may not always have those connections to people who understand what their life is like. and understand the challenges. Again, most people will say, oh, wow, that person has all the power, they have the influence, they have the money, their life must be perfect. And so sometimes they don't feel as comfortable sharing their challenges and whatnot. How would you go about, as again, you've been an executive leader for a long time, and you work with so many executive leaders. How would you recommend you go about building those connections with, like you said, people that you trust, not random people, but but people you actually trust?
Yeah, the hardest part is when you're new to an organization or a role, right? Because you don't have those relationships yet. And I would say that it's important to be cautious at the beginning of that journey to understand, who you can trust to have that kind of vulnerability with. And that's just the real world, right? So in those early times, I think it's important to really put some thought into the relationships that you're building and assess and feel out who are the people that I can really trust. And there is a point you have to make yourself vulnerable and take some risk,
Mhm.
right? If you don't do that, you'll never get there because, you can't wait for a year to go by before you take that leap. But the other thing is, you do it in small pieces, right? You don't jump in and tell them all your most vulnerable inner secrets and oh, I've picked this person and now we're going to go have a drink and I'm just going to share everything that's ever happened. Um, I think it's a little bit of I know this sounds maybe cheesy, but a little bit of a test drive, right? To have a somewhat vulnerable conversation with somebody and see how that goes. How does it feel? What kind of reaction do you get back from that person? Do you feel a sense of judgment? Do you feel a sense of somebody that is really listening to you and has your best interest in mind during that conversation? And then give a little bit of space and see what happens, to the relationship. And then you nurture that and you deepen that. I think that is the key. I think some people feel they have to dive into
Yeah.
the deep end, and that's not the case. But you do have to take some initial risk.
You know what's interesting is, so I talk about this in my book, Relationships That Work. But early on in my career, my the deputy assistant secretary of the agency I worked with, her and I, she was my boss's boss, and her and I would go to lunch maybe once a month, maybe sometimes twice a month, and she just mentor me. At that point, I was young. I was like 24, 25 years old, overseeing all of the executive leadership development for an agency. And she told me something I thought was so amazing that I didn't really digest it for years, but I knew it was important when she said it. She said, Alex, the person with the most information wins. And I was like, okay, it sounds really important. How do I go about this? And what she shared with me is, like you just said, being willing to to listen to people, right? Not always talking, but just listening. And I love that word you said, listening without judgment. And I think that's almost also part of who I am, but I really leaned into that with all the executives I worked with, and was just being there for them to listen. No judgment, no, not I have a solution for you, just to listen. And so many relationships were built simply from being someone that someone could talk to, and they knew that you weren't going to go out and share that information with anyone else or try to use it to backstab or anything like that. Just listening to people.
No, I think that's exactly right. And when you said that initially, I had a little trigger, and so I want to offer this caveat because I'm sure this was absolutely not the intention. But when some people hear the person with the most information wins, they hear I'm
Um,
I'm hoarding that information. I'm the
yeah.
only person with that information, right? And
Hmm.
that is a mistake that I see
Yeah.
people make, leaders make over time. That I have information, and the power is in owning it myself, when in fact, the opposite is where the real power is, when you share information. So it's getting the information, being that sort of listening post, in addition to being very observant and well read and all the ways that you can get the information, but then sharing the information is where the real power is.
I want to go down that thread. That's a great call out. I want to okay. So really quickly, so what she was talking about, what at least how I interpreted it, was collecting the information, because if you listen to people, then you actually know how you can maybe you'll be able to help them. And so the person with the most information, who willing to listen, understand before doing anything, can win. So they can build that a relationship. But I want to now tag onto what you said. So how do you decide when to share information and when not to? Because, like you said, they're sharing information is extremely important, and there are many positions and leaders who have to be very intentional and careful with what information they share. So, because someone could use it against you, maybe it's sensitive. So, how do you decide what and when to share?
Maybe I'm the wrong person to ask this question. And I'll tell you why. Because I 100% believe to be fearless in
Mhm.
how you share information. Now, that's not to say sensitive information or HR related information
Mhm.
or information about, people relationships that are none of that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But outside of that fenced in world, I think you need to be fearless. And if you have information that can help somebody else, whether it's helping them on a mentorship journey or helping them immediately in their day to day, I think you should be generous and
yeah.
fearless in sharing that information. I do not take my foot up off the gas on sharing information unless it falls into sort of that, privacy piece.
So man, because I'm pretty sure I 100%. I'm pretty sure I agree with you, and because you started off with the caveats, not sharing information about somebody else, right? You're not supposed to.
Right.
Not sharing sensitive information, PII. So all those things, those are guardrails. And then after that, being very willing to share. You know, my company does a lot of training on also trust building, and we one of the things we talk about is not just willy-nilly trust, but very smart trust. So like you said, testing out the waters, may I share this, may I share that, may I give you some space to do X, Y, and Z. But once you've provided me with enough data for me to say, okay, if I share something with you, you're probably gonna do something. You're gonna undermine me. You're gonna try to take credit for it. You're gonna do whatever it may be. I know there's probably gonna be a negative consequence to it. Just I guess being. Are you saying just in those situations, just more so be aware of that person, and maybe just be. Don't allow that person to change who you are. Is that maybe what you're saying?
I think so. I think that makes a lot of sense the way you just articulated that. You do have to, when you share something, just like when you write an email, you think you're writing an email to
Mm,
one person,
yeah,
you have to act and communicate in a way that if that is shared somewhere,
yeah,
it doesn't come back to you in a negative way.
yeah.
So if I'm operating from a place of, value centric, principle centric, ethical, if I'm operating with pure intent,
Mhm.
then if something is shared, the worst is that it's awkward for a minute,
Yeah.
right? So, this is a good part of the conversation because part of the reason I'm fearless with that sharing of information is that I'm not talking, bad about a person, or I'm not,
Mm.
right. It I operate from that good intent. In fact, one of the things I love to do, and I incorporated this fairly recently in my professional life. I deliberately talk good about people behind their backs.
I
That is a
love it.
powerful thing.
Mhm.
Um, for one, it's honest. It's great. It feels good to share when you really have a genuine, respect for somebody, or you have something they did that you really appreciate.
Yeah.
But it also communicates to the others that you're sharing that with how you operate.
Yeah. 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 I love that. I absolutely love it. And it sounds like you know, again, if this is not what you're saying, but it sounds like you're also very intentional about doing it. Not just like, oh, every once in a while I'll say something positive about someone. Like you're very intentional about sharing positive things about people behind their back.
Yeah, 100%. I think intentionality is um, when we talk about executive level leadership. Intentionality is something that's not always talked about and is very, very important. People that
Mhm.
operate at senior levels absolutely need to be intentional, particularly in their communication.
Can I can I take this a step further in about being intentional about talking positively behind people's back, which I think is so cool. I love how you even phrase it. Um, but also being intentional about sharing positive things that were shared with you with the other person. Like Tim goes and said, "Hey, Alex, Tanya was just so freaking amazing. I love how she did that the other day." Da, 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 da. And then I may go to Tanya, like, "Oh my God, Tim was just saying how amazing it was. Congratulations!" Like, because I saw this once, this incident one time. I've had it many times, but this one time thinking about there was an executive I was working with, and one of her staff members came to me and was like, "Oh my God, such and such is doing such a great job. She's been mentoring me. She's been supporting me. I really, really appreciate working with her." And I was like, "Oh man, congratulations!" I actually took that. I texted this leader and said, "Hey, by the way, I ran into one of your staff members. They just said X, Y, and Z." She wrote back saying, "Oh my God, thank you, Alex. I feel like no one appreciates what I'm doing, and this really gave me some energy for the day." And like, how often just making those connections could really help someone, you know?
No, 100%, 100%. And occasionally I'll let that person know, and they get a big giggle out of it, and then that sense of when you show gratitude toward people, that just the goodness that happens from that. But I'll say, "Hey, I was talking good about you behind your back," and then they'll say, "Well, what did you say?" And then I get to say it to them,
Yeah.
and it can be a powerful thing. And again, you have to be sincere because people
Hmm.
sniff. This isn't about manipulation. This is about just taking a deliberate approach
Yeah.
to how you already have assessed a situation, or a respect that you have again for a person or what they've done.
There's a quote I absolutely love. I say it all the time now. Um, how can you tell when someone could use some how can you tell when someone can use some encouragement? Their breathing. Basically meaning like anyone and everyone can use some encouragement. Like I think we forget. I think now I'm not gonna get on this horse today. I promise you, I'm not gonna get in this soapbox. Especially with the world of social media, where you see everyone is always winning. Everything is always they're always getting promotions. They're always getting honored. They're always this. But we all know that's not. But for some reason, I'm not right. And we all know, I think somewhere in the back of our head, that everyone's life can't be that perfect. Um, but again, there's this example of this woman who I work with, and um, my wife and I were driving. She's like, "Oh my God, I just saw her post on Facebook. She just did X, Y, and Z. It looked like so cool. Like she says her life is so amazing." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." And I knew I just spoke to this person a couple days earlier, and their cousin had been shot. Their father was in the hospital, and they were going through a really, really rough time. But via social media, it looks like life is just perfect. And so we never know how much of a positive impact we can have on someone by just one showing grace, and two, like you said, encouraging, saying, "Hey, I was talking good about you behind your back." Like you never know how much of an impact that can have on someone.
No, absolutely. And the one thing we don't like to talk about for some reason is that everybody, including senior leaders, including executives, need that to some level.
Hmm.
Everybody, it feels good no matter who you are, and some would, say, "Oh, I don't need that," but You do. It's a very human need, and I think sometimes it's tough to show that kind of appreciation to senior leaders because it feels like, disingenuous, or I'm sucking up, or but there's a great story in my Air Force career. Was We had a four-star that was sharing with us, a four-star officer in the Air Force, that he was walking the flight line one day, and he was making his rounds and talking to the very junior airmen that are out there, our mechanics and the people that operate the flight line. And he said to this young airman, one of the most junior out there, said, how are you? How are you doing?
Mm,
And the airman answered the question. They talked for a couple minutes, and he went to walk away. And the airman said, "Sir, how are you doing? How are you okay? How is everything with you?" And he said it really took him back because, of course, that power dynamic, you'd never
yeah.
get that. But
Hmm.
he said, it felt really good that somebody was concerned, and it caught me off guard. It's important. Our senior leaders need it too.
Hmm.
Uh, so I don't know how we fold that into the fabric of how we communicate, but it's something we should have on the radar.
So, I mean, I want to share two quick points. One is when we start executive coaching agreements and partnerships with our clients, one of the most interesting questions we ask that everyone is always taken aback about when we say it, and me and all my coaches do the same thing. We always say, "How are you doing?" And like 9 times out of 10, we're the first person to ask them that question in like 3, 4, 5 months. They're always focused on their staff. And again, like people just forget that these executives are people. So I consistently encourage that. Really quickly, there was a client I was working with, and there was a drop in some drop in productivity and a drop in engagement in a particular team. And we kind of went in there, started doing some surveying and whatnot. And long story short, we found that a leader was having some challenges, right? One of the senior leaders, and actually a few of them, but one in particular. And we started kind of digging into why this person was performing at this very high level. Now all of a sudden they're starting to tank down, and they didn't feel appreciated. They had been working so hard, so many hours for so long, but did not feel appreciated. And where we found where that tipping point where it started going down was there was a discussion about specifically acknowledging the work that the executive team had been doing, um, but ultimately, there is a decision to not acknowledge them because they were worried that it may look bad in the organization to acknowledge these leaders, and so they decided not to. And again, people felt a type of way about it. And so I told them, and again, we did a lot of coaching and training and consulting things like that. But at the end of the day, we had to tell them like this is a cultural thing. Either you appreciate all your employees or you don't, right? And if you say you appreciate all of them, then all means all. All doesn't mean everyone under a particular level. All means all. And I think if we do that, if we take that approach that everyone matters, um, then I think it's much easier for everyone to have a shared language and a shared behavior. Because then now they know, oh, I need to talk and appreciate everyone, not just, oh, only those people, this person, this person.
Yeah. If I could offer a thought there, there's something about the way that you message it, right? I think sometimes we don't give people enough credit that they can handle a nuanced message.
Mm,
Um, if you put it on social media, it has the chance to be lose context, right? So maybe if I highlighted that executive team on a LinkedIn post and I stumbled upon it, it would make me feel a certain way. But if I'm in a town hall with a group of people and I have a chance to stretch out and have a more nuanced message,
yeah.
I'm a big I call it the disclaimer. You put the disclaimer out there and just be completely transparent and break the fourth wall and say, we struggled for a minute to think about whether we were going to thank this team because we understand how it might feel to people.
Mhm.
But guess what? They really did a great job, and we need to say that.
Yeah.
Give
Yeah.
give people credit that they can handle a nuanced message, and then be transparent in how you deliver it.
Tim, again, this is why every time I jump off the line with you, I just sit down for maybe 2 hours just by myself, looking at the trees and the skies, because I just need to reflect on the deepness, the how my life has shifted in from that conversation. I wanna open the floor for you. 'Cause I know you gotta head out soon. Um, are there any last thoughts, perspectives, anything you want to share with the audience as we begin to wrap up?
The one thing that I find hurts most people in their leadership journey, especially those that have found success, that they arrive to a C-suite role or they arrive to an executive role, is that they give up on the journey, or they think they've arrived at the journey of true self-awareness. And you
Mm,
cannot grow and develop as a leader without self-awareness. So what I would offer, a couple things. One, find ways to mechanize that self-awareness, right? Have people that you trust, and have those relationships, and truly invite them to be honest with you. Cultivate those touch points, career coaching, whatever way you need to cultivate and mechanize that kind of feedback is so important, and even more important when you become a senior leader. What I would tell you is that the self-awareness problem as you mature and get success is less about what you don't know and more about what you think you do know.
mm,
And I would offer that you have to be humble enough to reevaluate that the way I have assessed my skills, my talents, my strengths, my weaknesses over time may not be the reality that's right now or in this context. And you have to be open, and it's such an easy to understand trap of, hey, I got here, it seems to be going well, but that's the minute that we begin to fail as leaders. So I would just offer that truly taking self-awareness as a fundamental part of your journey is critical, because you absolutely cannot grow without it. And if you're not growing, you're done.
whew. Um, there's no better. Actually, uh, for you listening, please, just please put in the chat box. Um, what was the biggest takeaway? Something that you want to implement into your life. Please, please, please put in chat, because I'd love to take that and figure out how we can then support that. So please do that. And two, when you said that, Tim, again, you're so spot on, and that is it's a balancing act, right? I think you you said something very similar to Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he said, the trick is to know you know enough to feel like you're competent, but to know you don't know you're enough that you know also to know you don't know everything, so you're willing to still think that you're potentially wrong and learn something new. And that is a very it can be a very difficult tightrope to walk. Um, if I can say one last thought on my own side, then I'll let you say anything you may have, and then we're bouncing back and forth. Um, I love this quote. I was interviewed for a radio show about 5-6 years ago, and they're asking me how I was able to raise this company up and do all these really cool things with executives, and at such a young age. And I said, it's funny. I feel confident in my incompetence. I'm very confident in my incompetence. I know I don't know everything. And because I know I don't know everything, I am so much more willing to seek ideas and perspectives from other people, because it's honestly easier to also to know that you don't know everything. It's now that all that stress is off of me. I'm like, oh, my job as a leader is really just to facilitate. Yeah, how do I bring the right people, the right ideas together, and remove barriers for them so they can be successful? Tim, you have any reactions to that? I promise you we'll wrap up right now.
No, I completely agree. And I think that is powerful. I'm also reminded of the adage that you can never put your foot in the same river twice. And that whole idea that it's not even just the growth journey, but it's the dynamics, the changes, the contextual elements are never the same.
Yeah.
So why would it be that this exact one version of you is going to work in every river, right?
That is so cool. Immediately had me thinking, I'm like, hold on, I can put my foot in the same river twice. I'm like, oh no. Because immediately it changed. I was going to call you out on that one. I was like, well, Tim, I've done this multiple times. Hey, Tim, you are freaking amazing, man. Thank you so much for coming on. Again, everyone, and for you listening right now, please know that this show has reached the people and has been able to bring on the leaders it has been on because of the engagement that you all provide, because of your likes, because of your subscribes, because of your forwards, your shares, which has brought more people to the table and allowed leaders to say, hey, look, this is a show where I can actually get my ideas out and people will hear it. And so I encourage you, if you haven't done so already, please click that like. We greatly appreciate it. And you know where I'm going with this. If you found anything of value from today's episode, don't keep it to yourself. Don't say that person over there should have been there. They could have been here. Don't just look back, reach back. Bring someone else this conversation. Share the information with them. I promise you, if you found value yourself, that someone else will find value as well. And as always, I encourage everyone here, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. Thank you. See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and in speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.